Hey, I'm Chris with Paint Pals. Today we're going to show you how to paint the baseboards. We're going to focus specifically on if you want to just freshen up your trim and you're not really looking to get a new coat of paint on the walls. We're also going to have this video a little bit more geared towards those that are just trying to do it themselves, and we're going to try to show you the easiest way to get this done and still get that professional look that you're desiring. So for today's trim painting project, these are the tools we're going to need. We're going to need a drop cloth here. We're going to need our masking machine with 9-inch paper, some regular masking tape. We're also going to need a roll of clean removal or low tack tape. We're going to need our caulk gun with some quick dry caulking, our paintbrush, our sanding block here. We got a bucket and a rag. We're also going to have a cleaning solution in case the trim is extra dirty, which it sometimes gets that way. And then, of course, last but not least, we're going to need our trim paint. First step we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this trim, and obviously this looks a little bit dirty. Just get some dust. Baseboards do collect a lot of dirt and stuff like that, so we're just going to take our cleaning solution here, spray a little on our wet rag, and we're just going to wipe this trim off and just make sure we've got a nice clean surface for that paint to adhere to. So before we actually put the masking here on the carpet, one thing I just wanted to go over real quick was a problem I see a lot of people have when they're new to using these masking machines is actually getting the machine to cut correctly and cut straight. So just a quick kind of go over that. We're just going to pull a little bit here, then you want to keep that pressure taut on here, and you want to kind of angle your masker so that blade's cutting into that, and you just want to start from the top and pull it straight down to the bottom like that. So now you've seen that, what we're going to do is we're going to tape our masker here, and we're just going to run out the length of trim that we want to do at one time, kind of measure that out, get our cut, and we'll take our masking machine here, and if you see here, I kind of like to set this tape so it's got a little bit of a lip hanging over, because what we're going to do is we're actually going to take our fingers and we're going to press that tape down right underneath that baseboard. Now what that's going to do is that's going to ensure that we don't get any paint on this carpet, and it's also going to allow us to paint the entire width of this baseboard. And we're just going to do this all the way down along. Sometimes you might have to pick it up a little bit, move it up like that to keep that tape edge where you want it. But this is really the easiest way I've found to keep paint from getting on your carpet when doing the baseboards. The next thing we're going to want to do is just look for any imperfections or anything along there that we want to get rid of before we paint. Now as you can see here, it looks like a little bit of a drip edge there from the last time this got painted. A little bit got scraped off there as well. So really all we can do with that is we really want to take this sanding pad and really get into that, and we're just going to try to get that as smooth and as flush with the rest of the baseboard as we can. Next thing we're going to do is we're just going to take our wet rag here again with our cleaning solution, and we're just going to give this a quick wipe just to get rid of some of that dust. The last thing we want is that dust to get caught up in our paintbrush and kind of ruin the finish of the paint when we're brushing it on. Next step is we want to get a nice clean line along the top of this baseboard since we're not going to be painting these walls and we're happy with this color. There's a few ways you can definitely do that. One way would be just to freehand a line or cut a line in along the top of that. And that's definitely a good way to do it. The only thing I found with that is you do need to have a lot of experience to really get a straight line. And if you're the do-it-yourselfer trying to just do this at home on a weekend, I don't think you're really going to be happy with the results after you try to freehand that line. So what I'm going to do here is show you a little method called tape caulking. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you that nice, clean, professional line without necessarily having years of experience to actually freehand that yourself. This is where our clean removal or low tack tape is going to come into play. We're just going to take this here and we're going to get a nice strip here going. And we just want to air a little bit up onto the wall. The main thing just being that tape is going to create the straight line for you, and we're going to let it do the work. So you just want to kind of keep an even gap along there, and we're going to just run this along this stretch of baseboard here and press that in, pull that, we'll cut that here, and we're going to run this all the way down to the end there. And don't be afraid to try again. You know, this does take a little bit of experience as well, but once we get that on there, really want to just take your finger and really just press that in. The next step is going to be the caulking part of the tape caulking process. So we've got our fast drying acrylic latex caulk here, and what you want to do is you want to cut just a really small hole on the end of there. We're really not caulking this to fill in a gap or anything like that. We're really just trying to get a nice film of caulking that's going to prevent any bleed through the paint. So once we get that there, we'll take our caulk gun and we'll just move it along here. Just a slight pressure on that trigger, just a little bit of caulking there. Since it is the fast dry caulking, it will dry really fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our wet rag and we're just going to kind of press our finger in there, and really you just want to try to wipe as much of that caulking as possible out of there. and you kind of have to just work it there. You're going to have some excess that gets on the rag. It's kind of nice to just, use different spots of the rag, and then once you, kind of get too much, you can rinse that out in the water as well. But for this little section here, we can pretty much just get everything we need. And what I always like to do is do it with the rag first, then I'll just take my actual finger and just really press it in there just to make sure that we don't have too much excess caulking on there. Like I said, we're just looking for that nice thin film of caulking that's going to prevent any bleed through of the paint onto the wall. So we're going to want to let that caulking dry up just a little bit on there. And since it's quick dry, you're going to get a fairly quick result of that drying. While we're doing that, we're going to go ahead and get our drop cloth laid out here just to protect any other carpet that our paper's not covering. Then we're going to actually grab our cut bucket here and our paint. And while it might be tempting just to try to brush out of this full gallon here, I really recommend using a cut bucket. You're going to be able to keep it a lot cleaner. You're going to be able to get the correct amount of paint in your brush. So we'll take that and we'll pour about, 2 to 3 inches of paint in there. We're really not going to need too much for this little section of trim. All right, so we've got our paint poured up here. I just want to take a few moments to go over the type of paint that I recommend for a trim project like this. We've got our SureFlow acrylic latex enamel by Diamond Vogel. This is in a satin sheen. They also have semi-gloss and gloss. I would really recommend staying away from like a gloss sheen, especially for a do-it-yourselfer. You're really going to run into just issues with brush strokes, where this is, you're going to get a good sheen from it, and it's also going to be a little bit easier to work with. So another thing I'd like to touch on is getting a good quality brush. You may be tempted to go with the cheapest brush, but it's really going to make your project a lot harder than it needs to be. The nice one with the angled edge here, some painters will swear by the the big round oval brushes with the flat tops on them because they hold so much paint, but for your sake as a homeowner just trying to do this yourself, this is really going to make the project easier for you, and I promise if you take care of this brush, it'll last you a lifetime. Got all our prep work done on our baseboards here. We're ready to get some actual paint on them. So we're going to take our brush here and we're going to dip it down in. Now the biggest mistake I see kind of inexperienced painters make is you really want to get some paint on that brush, and don't worry about that. We're going to wipe this off on the edges here with our excess. Then we're going to take that over to the baseboard, and we just want to kind of start getting a coat of paint on all of this. Now don't worry about how the brush strokes are looking right now so much. We just want to keep that wet. So you're going to kind of work fairly quickly, and we just want to kind of work that back and forth. Make sure we've got enough paint on there. Come all the way down to this corner, and this is where that angled tip is really going to help out, is where you can kind of get that into that corner there, and that's just going to press into those corners there nicely for you. So you get that in there. We're going to get a nice good amount of paint on here. Not so much that it's running. Now that's kind of the tricky part. Now once you get this on here, the thing that's really going to make this look good and have that professional look is we want to just run back and forth on this with some long, nice brush strokes, just to kind of even that out and just not have real short, choppy ones. This is really going to make that satin sheen look really nice. So now we've got our first coat on here. What we're going to do with our brush is we're going to stick it back here in the paint, make sure those bristles stay wet. You may even want to get a wet rag depending on how long you're going to be before you get back to it, and cover up the top of this can. This is still nice and wet. We're going to let this dry up, and we're actually going to do a second coat on it. Since we're doing pretty drastic color change going from this kind of tan to the white, it's definitely going to be essential for that. And even if you're not doing a drastic color change, I think you're always going to be happier with the results if you do 2 coats. It's about time to recoat this. A good way to tell, it all really depends on the heat in your house, the temperature, the humidity, everything like that. So you just feel that. If it's feeling dry to the touch, that usually means it's good enough to recoat. So like I said before, we're going to go ahead, get a nice amount of paint in our brush here to clean off our little drip edges there. And we're just going to kind of do that same process again. We just want to get the paint kind of spread out evenly over this. Get into these corners here. And just like before, once we get this all coated out with some paint, we're just going to take a couple big smooth brush strokes and really just get that nice and smooth on there. Alright, so now that we have our second coat brushed out on here, we really need to let that paint dry up quite a bit. We want it to get nice and hard before we're going to actually pull this top tape line here. So like I said earlier, these brushes will last a long time, but you do have to take care of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this down, we're going to wash it out in the sink with some warm soapy water. Alright, so now we've got our second and final coat on here. And what we're going to do next is we're going to pull our tape here. Now we've let this dry for probably 30 to 45 minutes, and I recommend you let it dry at least that long, if not longer. Now we're going to pull this tape and we're going to reveal our nice clean line along our new paint job. So we've got our top tape line pulled now. We're going to go ahead and clean up. We'll get this drop cloth pulled up, fold it away, and then we're just going to come along here and kind of pull our tape back. And sometimes, you know, that paint kind of seals against that tape line, so I always like to just go along and kind of break that free. And then we'll just pick that up here. And as you can see, we've got nice new painted baseboards and without having to paint that wall again.